Brahmaja Lokadipati Sahampati Katanjali Adivarangaya Chatta Sandita Satta Paraja Kajatika Desetu Dhammang Anukampiman Pajang.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So, I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to attend this very auspicious day in this very grand Buddhist center. To see my respects to all the Sangha members assembled here, and to all of you who have this interest in teaching practice of Lord Buddha. And of course, this is a very impressive building, and to see the interest in Buddha Dhamma growing in Malaya like this is, I never expected to see anything so impressive, actually. But the interest in Dhamma is something that I think is in the past 50 years has increased all over the world. And the word Dhamma, of course, is a significant word because in English we don't have any really exact equivalent to it. And it's a Pali word, and it means best translated as the truth of the way it is. It's not about some kind of abstract truth or some esoteric teaching of any sort. So the whole point of the Buddhist teaching is awakening human individuals to Dhamma, to truth, or to reality. And so talking like this, and sometimes in the West, where I live in England, people, well, what is the reality? Because they want me to tell them. And of course, the Buddha's invitation is to look and see for yourself. Why ask somebody else when you're experiencing it right now? So it's as simple as that. But yet, notice the human condition is one in which we see ourselves always in terms of the conditions, attachment to conditions, attachment to the physical appearance we have, and to the cultural attitudes and religious attitudes, personal identities. Everything becomes more than what it is. And so the practice of meditation as encouraged by the Buddha, the samatha vipassana ways of meditating are ways of developing a sense to experience for yourself this completely awakened consciousness in the present moment. When I first started practicing meditation in Thailand many years ago, and of course the emphasis was on the three characteristics of existence, of all conditioned phenomena, anicca, dukkha, anatta. And anicca I had no problem with. It seemed obvious, spoke for itself. Dukkha, I could see that. Anatta, I couldn't at all. Because if there's one thing I felt is that I'm here, this is me, and why should I deny it, I am a separate person, a personality, an individual, a physical form. And to say that I don't exist sounds ridiculous. And then that's from the very conditioned mind of seeing myself through the ego, the sense of my identity, my self-worth in regards to my experience of life and my appearance, nationality, social status, religion, educational qualifications, gender of the body, age, all the rest create this sense of this is what I am, this person, this separate individual person. And so anatta was the kind of enigmatic, the enigma of for me, because even though I didn't, I wasn't kind of saying it's not true. I didn't quite understand what the point was. And then over the years, training in monastic life with Luang Por Chah and actually beginning to investigate the self-view, the sense of self as I experienced it in my daily life, I could see, how I began to observe how this awareness was one thing, and the emotional habits, the memories that would arise and cease, the identities, the cultural assumptions, everything would arise and cease according to conditions, and they were always changing, and that one couldn't find anything in these conditions that had any permanent soul or self, or they are what they are, but they are in the state of flux, of change, and that which is aware of change. Then, of course, to be really aware of change, you have to give up thinking about it and be the mindfulness itself, be the observer, the knower. So this is very direct and it's very simple, but human beings are not simple. We're very complicated. And coming from my background from the United States, complicated personality that I imposed on experience of life was the very thing that I could relate to as suffering. Because as I grew older, and when I was a child, life was quite simple, and then because I was discovering life, and I didn't have a lot of complicated views or opinions about anything, just learning, experiencing, investigating the things around me. But then, as you grow up, you gain more and more conditioning, and then I remember in my teenage years, as when I really began to notice how much suffering I was experiencing. I think in the teenage years, one's self-consciousness is at its peak. If you notice, most teenagers are very much worried about what others think of them and how they look and what kind of clothes they wear. And of course, you're making your sense of your self-worth and judgment by how acceptable you are to your peers, and this tends to linger through one's life if one doesn't really investigate experience. I found the life of a Buddhist monk a great opportunity to do this, because this was the whole point of being a bhikkhu, according to Luang Por Chah, was to find out for yourself and to cultivate the path of awareness. The teaching of the Lord Buddha is an expedient means, So in the Western world, where we have, like for example in the UK now, it's a multicultural, multi-religious society. So there's been enormous efforts to understand other religions. They have this interfaith movement in London and in other parts of the UK that try to bring all the different religions together and at least have some kind of discuss their differences and try to create some kind of harmony and respect for each other's religions. And of course, there's almost every religion now represented in, say, the London interfaith movement. So different forms of Buddhism as well as Hindu and then the different Christian, Jewish, they have Zoroastrian, Baha'i, everything, that Muslim, so that all this is meeting, and of course the difference is wanting to find a common bond or some kind of common belief. They're always struggling to form some kind of prayer that all religions could relate to and all religions could agree to and say. So they found on this interfaith movement in London that all religions can agree on a certain prayer except the Buddhists. So then the accusation is that the Buddhists are not a real religion, or that it's more of a philosophy, or it's a kind of form of humanism, or ways of putting it outside the category of religion. Because to most people, like in the Western world, they regard a religion as believing in God, believing in a deity. And so and of course, Buddhists, we don't have this. This is not the foundation of our practice. So it does put us almost in the opposite. They almost accuse us. Some would even consider us atheists, which is now quite respectable in Britain to be an atheist. So it's not like you're going to be persecuted. But there's always a desire to label and fix you into some kind of category. And Buddha Dhamma doesn't really fit totally into any category. So is it a religion, is the question. And then tracing the word religion back to its Latin roots, religio, it means, literally means in Latin a kind of a conventional means to bind you or to the ultimate reality. So it is, in this sense, Buddhism is a religion, because it definitely does that. And then, it's not bind you and a kind of tie you, but it's a way of pointing at the ultimate truth, or whether you call that ultimate truth, or in theistic religions, it's always a form of has a paternal aspect to it. So a belief in God is the way Christians tend to regard religion. Now, in the Buddha Dhamma, there's not a denial of God. It's not like, it's criticizing that, but it doesn't approach that subject. It's not the kind of modus operandi. It's not the basis for being a Buddhist. There are gods in the scriptures, deities and devatas. But this isn't the same thing as what the Christian, Muslim, Jewish see as God, you see. So then saying that I definitely see the Buddha Dhamma as a very clear religion in that meaning of its original meaning. It's not a theistic religion. Now, theistic religions tend to start with a creed of some sort, so I believe. And then Buddha Dhamma starts with Buddha's first sermon after enlightenment, and there is suffering. So this is quite interesting juxtaposition, because when I was brought up as a Christian, we had to learn the creed. When I was a child, I can still recite the Nicene Creed for you if you want. something you never forget. But so it starts out, I believe in God, and so this was, this was the beginning phase. This is what you start with, and then in Buddha Dhamma, of course, it's in terms of the actual unique teaching of the Lord Buddha. He taught there is suffering, there are the causes, the cessation, and the way of non-suffering, or the path, or the Eightfold Path. Now this is very interesting, why the Buddha used something so ordinary, so banal, so common as human suffering as a noble truth. Because, why don't you talk about love or universal love, or something inspiring? This suffering bit sounds very depressing. Because it's easy to misinterpret the intention of the Buddha as some kind of just person who's teaching a depressing way of looking at life. But the very statement in the Pali tradition is it's a statement. It's not saying everything is, or there's only suffering. It's a statement that's quite obvious. It's a fact. We can all see that ourselves. It's not a matter of believing in it, it's just recognizing it. So there is suffering, and then of course the way to be free from suffering. Well, sometimes in the interfaith movement they never get to the fourth noble truth. They just stop at the first one, because that's the first thing they encounter. The thing I found in living in Britain during these many years is that there is, the teaching of the Buddha fits into almost every category. It's religion, it's philosophy, it's psychology, it's science. It's everything. It includes everything. And this word Dhamma is that way. It means it's a word that may include, it's all inclusive. So Buddha's teaching can be put in different contexts. So when I find I'm talking to an interfaith group, I talk about Buddha Dhamma as religion. But if you're talking to a group of scientists, then you can put it in that category, or psychologists. But it's just that in it, the Buddha's teaching includes everything and no thing. So it's it's like a paradox, or it takes you beyond just the conditioning of thought and having to categorize and define and explain and analyze every condition like we tend to do. We want to know. There's this conceit in the human heart that wants to know everything about everything. Like God, to be at the top of the universe and know everything. And so that, we're trying to desperately now to learn more, increase our brain power, increase our knowledge, to know more and more about everything that we can possibly know about. But it just goes on and on and on. And both into, vast, universal, endless, infinite universe that we're experiencing, to the minutiae, nanotechnology and microscopic, the other direction of just that which we cannot see, but we can experience or see in some way through technology. So this direction of always seeking something outward. Now notice that the human in your own lives, how the tendency is always to seek happiness as something you find outwardly, or seek security, or this movement because of the nature of our human state of looking outward and trying to find. Even in theistic religions, it's easy to interpret them in terms of finding God as some external force out there, and yet in the mystical form, say, of Christianity, it's about seeking God within, and yet the conditioning, the cultural conditioning, and the thinking process tend to encourage this movement outward, to always look for something external, either in the sky or on the planet or in another country or another person. Now, this is, and then the Buddha's teaching in his teaching of Dhamma is more directing the attention inward. Well, this is a direction that, of course, is what we call Buddhist meditation. We're looking inward. We're not seeking something external anymore. So that's the form of the Buddha Rupa that you can all see here in this Dhamma hall. That it's a figure of a human being that's awake. You know, it's not asleep. It's not in a trance. It's fully present, but it's also looking, you know, the Buddha inward, but not shutting out the world. Buddha Rupas usually, some do, shut their eyes, but generally speaking, most Buddha Rupas have their eyes open, and they're present, composed, peaceful, open to all that goes on in their consciousness, whether it's internal or external. Well, this is an example of how to regard a Buddha image, Buddha Rupa, because it is an iconic form, a religious form. The Buddha never established Buddha Rupas. He did not, there were none at his time, and they came hundreds of years later. And so sometimes purists say Buddha never allowed Buddha images, and and they condemn us for not being true to the Buddha's teaching, because they see it in a certain way, you know, as Buddha Rupa, as maybe another form of idol worship. But also, you know, I personally, this is a personal take on Buddha images, I really like them. And I think, you know, iconic, religious iconic forms, to me are, you know, they're very helpful in reminding myself. You know, when you look at this image here, this Buddha Rupa, you can look at it aesthetically, say, oh, it's beautiful, or I don't like it, or whatever. You can see it in terms of aesthetic taste, or you can just dismiss it, and you know, like what I was saying before, Buddha never, you know, he never had Buddha Rupas at his time, and that came later, and so we can say we shouldn't have any. That's one way of looking. You can look at them as just part of a tradition. Well, you know, that's the way Buddhists, so we just accept the package. We can form our own opinions, and you know, according to our own tastes or tendencies. But in terms of developing mindfulness and meditation practices, I found them as you know, rather significant, because when I look at the Buddha Rupa, it always reminds me of Buddha, of Buddho, of awareness. You know, then also I found living with these forms, because they are actually peaceful, iconic forms. You know, they're not in a state of passion or excitement, or they're not floating up in the air, living in a different realm. Usually the Buddha's touching the ground, or there's a sense of being grounded on this planet in a human body, but fully present, fully awake. So this is, you know, then this as a reminder. We do need reminders, because the problem we all face, why we suffer so much, is heedlessness, forgetting the Dhamma. So forgetting the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. So we get caught up in all the worldly pressures and the desires of modern life, the stress and the pressures and the attitudes and fashions of the time, and they pull us outward. They draw us out into, wanting or not wanting, forming opinions and views. And also at this time there's so much, on this planet, a kind of fear element, an anxiety because of the ignorance that exists in the human heart at this time with this enormous human population that I don't think this planet has ever had to deal with before. And so the human population is enormous and ignorant of Dhamma. Even though we're educated, we know about things, but not about Dhamma. So this is establishing this Buddhist center here is something to really respect and to consider how to use a place like this for reminding us all through education, through meditation practice, and just encouragement towards looking more honestly and practically at ourselves, not in a critical way. Like Buddhist meditation, vipassana, is not about analyzing your problems and judging yourself, criticizing yourself because you have anger or jealousy or fear. On a personal level, I grew up I was a youth in the 1950s, and modern psychology was the word of the day. And when I was in the Navy, I used to buy all the books I could, recently published bestsellers on modern psychology, fascinated with trying to understand the nature of the mind. But it was, I'm not disparaging this, but it wasn't a liberating experience. I tended to form opinions and increase the sense of myself through this, through trying to figure out why I feel like this, why I act like that, and who's to blame for it. Because in those days there's always somebody to blame. And parents were usually the objects. So we were trying to. My mother didn't. I wasn't really breastfed, so that was why I suffered.